Hello, my name is Janie Capri, and I believe in experiencing life like you're living in a novel. So come with me to host a book club. And if you ever wanted to join a book club, this is the perfect video to do that. This video does contain spoilers, but it's essentially chapter stamped, so you can pause the video, read up until that point, and then you can feel like we're discussing it together. I hope that you'll read the book along with me and put all of your thoughts and opinions down below so we can have a discussion about it.
If you'd like some inspiration for how to live your life like the main character, stick around by subscribing.
Now let's get into the video. There comes a time in every young person's life to hear the call of mature hobbies. Some choose to knit or sew. Others decide to start running. So now that I've reached the ripe age of 25, I have the gnawing urge to join a book club. Here's how I set mine up. First, I reached out to my friends to see if anyone would be interested. Are you interested? We then decided on a genre and a novel. Thank you, Robin, for suggesting this book. We're reading a mystery/thriller, so I just really want to be surprised and lean into that. I also want to do a check-in partway through the book and just get everyone's predictions about what is happening and who did it. I also want to turn these notes into discussion questions that we can use for the actual book club. Here's the rundown of the book. There's a high-profile couple getting married off the coast of Ireland, and it was planned with perfection in mind. But as the festivities begin, someone ends up dead. But who killed him? Was it a groomsman? A bridesmaid? Perhaps it was the bride's oldest male friend. It's our job to decide who didn't wish the happy couple well, and why. Because this is set as a wedding party and a murder mystery, I expect there will be lots of characters and breadcrumbs to keep track of. So I've decided the only logical thing to do is to succumb to complete chaos. As I find new characters and plot lines, I'm going to be adding them to this wall. I'll be updating every 30 pages or so, or if there's something incredibly important to the plot. Let's go ahead and dive in. All right. First things first, we're going to start with the location. It's located on an island, a mythical island off the coast of Ireland called the Cormorant Island, which is named after this bird. It's very ominous because the bird is a representation of greed, bad luck, and evil. The wedding venue is called the Foley, which back in the time period when they were actually used, they were ornamental, shown as a display of power and wealth. It leads into our first character, Aoife, who uses this wedding venue for our high-profile couple, which includes Will, who is an actor on an adventure reality TV show, and Jules, who is an editor for an online magazine. Now back to Aoife. She is the wedding planner of the entire event, and she is married to Freddie, who caters all of the events. Something I think that's important to know is the only way to get on or off the island is by boat. It's very secluded, it's beautiful, and I would say the setting very much has a haunting feeling behind it. The next perspective that we're shown is Hannah, who is the wife of Charlie, in my opinion, our top suspect. Now, something else I also want to put in here is I have only read up to 40 pages at this point, so everything on here is just speculation. Will has not died, but just by reading the back of the book, I'm assuming he's the one that ends up dying. Back to Hannah. He is the +1 of Charlie, who is the male best friend of the bride, Jules. This next part of the story is told from her perspective. It's her and her husband that are traveling by boat to get to the island. You can tell right off the bat that she is very insecure, and she is the exact opposite of Jules. Jules is very ambitious, calculated, and needs things to be a certain way. While Hannah is messy, she's insecure, she's worried, and I think she's specifically insecure about the relationship that Charlie has with Jules. Charlie thinks the world of Jules. They have gone way back. He's pretty much the only friend that Jules has. She doesn't really have any friends. He is also insecure in his own way, specifically when it comes to money. His background is a teacher. I don't remember what Hannah's is at this point. I don't know if it necessarily says, but they do have children together. Then at this point, we are finally introduced to Jules and her perspective. She is the bride. She needs everything curated, beautiful, lovely. She is very much looking forward to her wedding day. She is very much, you could say in love, you could say infatuated, you could say in lust with Will. They have not known each other for a very long time, which is very unlike her, who is calculated. She wants everything to go a certain way. And so it pretty much goes against everything that she believes to do something on a whim, but she is justifying it by just knowing what she wants. She knows that she wants Will, and that's what she's going to go after. She's not going to waste time dating or being engaged when she knows that she's ready to marry him. She has also delivered a very suspicious note at some point that basically says, call off the wedding. She's definitely feeling anxious about that whole thing, but is choosing not to think about it. Then we have moved on to Jono, who is the best man of Will. From the outside characters, he is described as messy and dumb and insecure and having let himself go. And then we are provided an opportunity to actually look into his psyche and his perspective of things. And indeed, he is insecure and very much compares himself to Will in a lot of aspects. And overall, it seems like a lot of characters just do not like him. He also makes really weird, creepy comments about Jules' little sister, Olivia. I'm kind of inclined to agree with everyone else as well. At least currently, he's kind of creepy. And Olivia is the last character that we're introduced to. She is the half-sister of Jules. She is her bridesmaid, and overall, she is just very sad, is the best way to describe it. You can tell that she just has a lot weighing on her shoulders, and it has a lot going on, especially with her mental health, and she's got some secrets going on too. Seems like there's some health issues going on as well. It kind of alludes to her almost passing out at one point. She definitely has some stuff that's going to get dug up later on in the story. Other than that, in Jono's perspective, you kind of get an idea of some of the bridesmaids. You get an idea of the groomsmen. They are called ushers in this book. So we've got Femi, Duncan, Peter, and Angus. I have no reason to have him as top suspect right now, besides just the fact that I don't like him. There's not a ton of personality traits that are going on with them. Something you also need to know is that Will went to a private school with his chums. They all go way back together, and that's the reason why that they are all of his groomsmen. And overall, it seems like in some aspect or another, the groomsmen have kind of made a name for themselves, are pretty established. Again, Jono is the only one that is not that. He compares himself to Will as well as the other guys in the group, where currently he doesn't have a job. Duncan is a venture capitalist, Femi is a surgeon, Peter is in advertising, and Angus is in a development firm. And again, it seems like a lot of them have gotten these jobs because of the connections that they had with the private school or just their parents' money. Overall, I'm going to kind of describe my thought process with how I've categorized everything. So starting off with the victim, I believe that Will will be the victim. Again, because of just reading the back of the book, it seems like he's the one that ends up dying. It seems like a lot of stuff is revolving around him. He kind of gives off the vibes of like the person who, oh, they lit up a room when they walked in. You never want to be that person because that's the person that always goes missing. Anyways, I believe that he's going to be the victim. I believe something bad is going to happen to him. A piece of evidence that I found. When Jules was coming up with the seating arrangements, she had invited one of the producers of Will's TV show, and he kind of seemed hesitant about it. Like he didn't love that idea. Don't know why. Don't know if we're going to be introduced to this producer later on, but I felt like that was a pretty important clue. Moving on, we have our top suspects. Again, I don't know anything. This is just going based off of vibes. Charlie, the best friend. Like they're very much implying that he's in love with Jules still, and so he has the most to gain from having him gone. I also think that he's most likely the red herring. He's the obvious choice to be the bad guy, which makes me think that even though right now he's a top suspect, that will quickly deteriorate. Angus, I have no reason other than I don't like him. He's giving off prep boy vibes. Yeah, but I stand by my decision with that. Okay, then we get into the category of just a little bit sus. We've got Hannah, Jules, and Olivia. Jules, I feel like is controversial to have in this because she very much is in love with Will, but again, maybe not in love. It might be more in lust. And so she may be marrying him for other reasons that we haven't found out yet. Hannah, I don't necessarily feel like that she has a reason to kill Will as much as she does Jules, but I think insecurity makes you do pretty messed up things sometimes. So now Olivia, she's just a little bit sus, not necessarily because she has anything against Will at this point, but she just has secrets of her own that she's keeping right now. And I want to figure out what those are. And then we've got our probably innocent category. We've got Aoife, Jono, Femi, Duncan, Peter, Freddie. Most of the ushers are over here just because we don't know a lot about them. We don't have a lot of their perspectives going on. Jono seems innocent enough, but again, maybe a red herring. I may end up moving him up the suspect list just because you can tell that there is some amount of jealousy when it comes to Will. Femi, Duncan, and Peter are our groomsmen. Overall, I don't really know much about them. They just seem there to be supporting of their old schoolmate. And then we've got Freddie, who so far is my favorite character because he just is a wholesome chef. And yeah, I think he's pretty adorable, and I just imagine him being like the most cuddly, friendly person ever. But yeah, he's my favorite character so far. So if it ends up being him, I'm gonna be very sad. All right, we have been introduced to a new character, which is Jules' mother. It's told from Jules's perspective, so we know that she is irresponsible, cold, and unreliable. The way that she parented Jules is much different than the way she parented Olivia. And I hardly know anything about this woman, but she's already high on my suspect list. Before I get into all of that, let's break this down. Jules walks in to go talk to her mom for a little bit. Mainly, she's kind of complaining about Olivia, how Olivia doesn't want to be there, and how she's been trying to include her and everything. And her mom is like, hey, let's give her a break. She just went through a breakup. And Jules is very much dismissive of the whole thing because she feels like, again, Olivia, one, is a child, she's still a teenager, and is blowing this entire thing out of proportion. This also trails back to a lot of resentment that Jules has towards her mom. She was raised very differently than Olivia. Jules was raised in a very chaotic upbringing. Mom got pregnant with her when she was super young. She wanted to be an actress still and wasn't ready to give up that lifestyle. And so she made some pretty irresponsible financial decisions, which led to Jules feeling like she had no control over her childhood, didn't have food on the table, and just essentially was given a childhood that was non-existent. Well, by the time Olivia came along, she actually had a dad that was in the picture. Mom actually wanted to be a mom and didn't have resentment towards the second daughter. And overall, what we end up gleaming is Jules has anger issues, which comes to our first piece of evidence. It is very obvious that Will does not know that Jules has anger issues, and she is trying to be on her best behavior for the wedding, and that her family brings out the worst of her anger issues. I mean, to be fair, like, I feel like that's pretty common with people. Our families kind of get on our nerves. That's just how families work. But like, she was imagining wanting to smash this one object into splinters. And I think overall, because she's hiding this part of her from Will, I think that's a big red flag. She's wanting to come off, I mean, to be fair, anyone would want to come across more approachable to someone that they find romantically attractive. But at this point, if you're getting married, it kind of feels like you should know what you're getting into. And if that's something that you are dealing with, then that's something you're dealing with and you should be talking about with your spouse. Then it pans to Hannah's perspective, where they are arriving on the island. And overall, it just goes to show how deeply insecure Hannah is compared to Jules. She compares everything that she does to what Jules is and does, whether it's the way that she's looking or the way that she has this relationship with Will. And how we are getting a glimpse into the relationship that Charlie and Hannah feel like their relationship isn't as strong as it used to be before they had kids. They feel like they're not very romantically involved. At least she's feeling that it's not romantically involved, that they're acting more like roommates or business partners. And then something else that does pop up too is once they're on the island, Charlie is very cold with Will. It is very obvious that he does not like Will. So just kind of confirms why he would be our top suspect. Next up, we are bouncing back over to Olivia. Her and Hannah are both trying to avoid just being with the wedding party in general. Again, Hannah is feeling really insecure, as well as Olivia. Olivia feels like Jules doesn't really want her around, and so she is hiding out in the coastline in a cave, where Hannah ends up also being. Olivia almost reveals some sort of secret that she's been hiding it to Hannah. Again, she just went through a breakup, but she said, one, she went through a breakup, and two, she also dropped out of uni. And that none of this other stuff would have happened if she hadn't gone through the breakup. So is she just talking about dropping out of uni? No, because she was literally about to spill the beans to Hannah that something else happened. We're not sure what it is yet, but again, who knows? Maybe something has been set in motion that will end with Will's demise. We then end this recap with Aoife, who at this point is taking a little breather. She's able to take a little break from all the wedding planning and prepping that she's been doing, and she decides to go for a walk out to the graveyard. She gives a little bit of a background about how her and Freddie have bought the Foley, whatever, and how she is more connected to it than people seem to appear, especially like the locals and stuff kind of think, oh, they bit off a little bit more than they could chew. So she goes out to the graveyard and she is talking to one of the graves saying, I hope that you're proud of me. I hope that you're happy. My guess is that it's some sort of a parent or grandparent, could be a sibling, but I feel like usually when you're wanting people to be proud of you, it's more about the parental figure. So who is in the grave is going to be my next question / piece of evidence. All right, we're going to have a little bit of a dance mom moment where I'm going to be rearranging things based off of the new evidence that I've gathered. So far, I really don't feel like Aoife has put forth any evidence that she has anything specifically against the couple. I'm sure she's involved in some way, just not evident yet. So she gets to stay. Hannah, again, her resentment, I feel like, is more towards Jules than Will. So she gets to stay. Charlie is still our top suspect. I put Mom as a top suspect as well. I will, though, in fact, be moving Jules up. I feel like because the wedding has happened on such a short timeline, that it's much more likely that she has ulterior motives to wanting to marry Will. Olivia, on the other hand, gets to stay in just a little bit sus. She's doing stuff that's a bit shady, but again, I don't think it has anything to do with Will at this point. All right, next update. The other perspective that happens in the book every once in a while is flash forward to the actual wedding night when the crime has already occurred. One of the waitresses is stumbling in from somewhere out in the middle of the night in the dark. They're going back and forth between the Foley and the tents where the wedding party is all happening. She's stumbling in, she's frantic, she's seen something that's really scary, and Aoife is trying to comfort her when she's calmed down enough-ish to communicate what happened. She said there was a lot of blood and a body, and then she faints. Then we are taken back to Hannah. She's getting ready for a drink/cocktail/dinner hour. She's put on a cute little black dress, feeling herself. As her and Charlie go down to be with the rest of the wedding party, she notices that she has picked up the attention of Will. Dun dun dun. So at this point, she feels like there's some sort of a flirtation thing going on. They're looking at each other, they're making eye contact, and then she's like, wait, I'm married. So, I feel like that's a piece of evidence and makes her a bit more suspicious that she now has a crush developed, and she feels like maybe it's mutual, which isn't looking well for a guy who's about to get married and a woman who is already married. Hello, where are you? There's also a portion of the evening where she is listening to Charlie and Jules reminisce about their teenage almost romance. Like, it seemed like they had a crush on each other, but maybe not. Basically, Charlie was her boating instructor. She wanted to learn how to sail. And so he was 2 years older than her. She found him really attractive. And it just was a really awkward conversation for Hannah to have to relive over and over and over again because she's heard the story a billion times. At some point, she doesn't like how the conversation is going, and so she tries to change the subject. And so she's talking to Will about his TV show, which then unintentionally outs her as having watched it, which Charlie doesn't know about. We then get another flashback to the wedding night where nothing really serious happens. It's just, hey, this girl is like really concerned, like she had fainted, she's kind of awake again. And the rest of the wedding party decide, hey, maybe we should go investigate further. Mainly the ushers that are wanting to do that because Aoife is saying, hey, everyone should probably just stay here because it's dark, there are cliffs, there are obviously things that are going on, and I don't want anyone else to get hurt. Then we're back to Jules' perspective. Jules' dad shows up to the party, which is pretty impressive considering he is someone who has been absent for the majority of her life. And then even as she's an adult, which he's the reason why that she was trying to learn how to sail in the first place. But anyways, he's a very busy man. He's kind of intimidating. She was honestly impressed that he showed up at all because it's the first time that him and Will are even meeting, because they had tried to get them to meet in the past, but Dad was always busy. Pretty much the instant he arrives, he kind of sizes Will up as well, so you can tell he doesn't really like him. And Dad also shows up with girlfriend, who's basically Jules' age with 2 young kids. So that's fun. And she's French. Right now, he seems like a very much of a background character, so he's probably innocent at this point. So they eventually sit down for dinner, and Mom, who is forbidden from giving any sort of speech at the actual wedding, decides that it is time for her to make a speech. Jules is furious and hates where everything is going. Anything that the mom says she feels like is just a stab in the back, it's a backhanded compliment, and pretty much takes all the credit for that, even though, as we said, she's unreliable and doesn't know what she wants. And so Jules is pretty miffed about the entire situation. I'm hesitant to call it evidence, but it's at least something. I think overall the speech just shows that Mom is jealous of Jules. And so maybe she's jealous of the cute husband who literally has it all. Attractive, driven, has a really cool career being an actor. And so maybe Mom is a little bit jealous. So at this point, everyone is still at dinner and the perspective turns back to Jono. They bring up the stag party, which is this mysterious thing that happened that Charlie was invited to and apparently did not have a very good time. Jono feels really bad about it and none of it was his idea, even though he planned it. Will's TV show is also brought up and the ushers are basically like, hey, is your TV show inspired by this one game that we played? It's more like a hazing that we played when we were at our pretty boy prep school, where the boys were kidnapped from their beds in the middle of the night, plopped in the middle of nowhere in the woods, and they had to find their way back to campus. That was brought up, which is very interesting because that essentially is the premise of the TV show that he's on, is he's dropped off into these various places around the world and he has to find his way and survive the night. And we wrap up Jono's chapter by him having everyone taste test his whiskey, which a few different people kind of excuse themselves at this point. They were going to be starting playing drinking games, card games, that kind of thing. And it kind of implies the night is about to get a lot more wild. There's something suspicious definitely going on with the stag party. Probably is part of the reason why Charlie doesn't like Will even more. But Jono is keeping a secret that we need to uncover. Right, let's update the wall. So at this point, Mom is definitely staying in our top suspect list. I'm feeling pretty confident with keeping Charlie here. Hannah, at this point, I feel like it could go either way. If her and Will end up having some sort of chemistry with each other on the night of the wedding, I feel like that doesn't necessarily inspire her to want to kill him, but if something happens, she decides, oh, well, if I can't have him, nobody can have him. That kind of puts her on more of the suspecty list. But for now, I'm just going to keep her here because it seems like, I don't know, I wouldn't even say like an innocent crush, but there's just too many variables going on at this point. Jono, on the other hand, is definitely keeping a secret regarding the Stag Knight. And I don't know, I just feel like he's jealous of Will in his own way and wants to be him. Like, he had also auditioned to be on the same show. We're going, I don't know, it almost sounded like they might have been co-hosts or something. I just feel like he is keeping secrets and something's not adding up, and it may be jealousy and maybe something else going on. But he's moved up to the just a little sus category.
All right, in this section of the book, we definitely learned a lot. I've got some theories brewing that the author is leading us with breadcrumbs. We picked up with Hannah. She is in the midst of all of the ushers and most of the party members wanting to play this drinking game. She's not having it. So she kind of gives the eye to Charlie and she's like, hey, like, let's get out of here. And he's peer pressured by the other ushers to stay. So she ends up leaving, bumping into Olivia on the way out. And they decide to go back to the cave to finish the conversation that Olivia and them had started initially in the cave. But before we jump over to that part, there was something that was said by, well, not just one of the ushers, but all of the ushers, but it was brought up specifically by Duncan. It got really rowdy as they were wanting to play this game, or right before they wanted to play the game, and they were in school. Hi, baby. You want to come play? So they're reciting this chant in Latin over and over again, and it sounds very menacing and scary and demonic. So I'm not necessarily going to try to pronounce it, but I am going to attach it to Duncan's character, even though I feel like it almost fits more in with Jono because of how into it. Like, all of the ushers were into it, but specifically him. And basically when you translate it, it says, do brave deeds and endure. That's the initial school motto in Latin. All of the students, or maybe it's specifically this group, added to the end of that a Latin phrase that says, if we cannot move heaven, we will raise hell. We jump forward in time to when the wedding has actually happened. All of the ushers have volunteered to go investigate whatever this waitress had seen. And that's pretty much all it says. They're gathering a first aid kit and torches, which is very rustic. And they head off into the dark. Then this is where things really get interesting. Olivia and Hannah are back in the cave, and Olivia is just bursting at the seams, wanting to talk about whatever the thing it is that she's been through. So she reiterates, yeah, I went through this breakup with this guy that I really liked. I felt like we were soulmates, and he's with this other girl, and like she's posting stuff online about them. I really want to get him back. I really want to make him jealous. And so she makes a dating profile where she says she's 26. And so she ends up matching with someone that is 15 years older than her. You want to know who's also about 15 years older than her? Pretty much all of the ushers and the groom. Okay, do you see where I'm leading this? Anyway, so she matches with this guy. She's staying in Jules' flat, kind of implying that she's, oh, this grown up, I'm so successful, I'm so mature. So she brings this guy over, keeps meeting up with him. We get to the point where Jules is having a magazine party, and Olivia wants to bring, his name is Steven, or at least he says his name is Steven. Again, I have my suspicions about things, but brings him as her +1. And she, for whatever reason, gets like really nauseous and sick. She just gets really anxious about the whole situation and ends up spending pretty much the entire time in the bathroom. And so he sends her home in a cab. And then after that, she never sees him again. Here comes my next theory. So I'm going to attach this to Olivia, but I'm pretty sure that Will is Steven. And now I'm like, racking my brain because I can't remember it, and I didn't know if it was going to be all that big of a deal, but it is. I can't remember what I said now about how Will and Jules met, but now I'm thinking it might have been at that party, or maybe they were already dating before then. I feel like Will might have either found out that they were sisters at that point, or he hopped from one sister to another at that point. It kind of implies that there's more to the situation. She talks about seeing red and white, like blood on sheets or something to that effect. And so yeah, there's definitely something going on, and I'm pretty sure Will is Steven. If I had to like bet money on it, I probably would. Also, something else that was kind of creepy that happened was when Hannah and Olivia were coming back, Hannah went back to her room, Olivia is heading to her room, and Jono, who at this point, every time I read something about him, it just lower and lower on the peg of how I feel about him. Like, he's just creepy. Kind of felt bad for him at first, because like when you read from his perspective, he doesn't seem like that bad of a guy, and then you read it from everyone else's perspective and it's like, maybe you are not a trustworthy narrator. Anyways, so he's kind of creepy. He grabs her arm, he's all drunk, and he's like, we should dance tomorrow at the wedding. And she like completely blows him off, is very much creeped out by him. Anyways, that then leads us back to Jono. When he's staying in his room, he's very much under the influence, and he's having these like kind of PTSD-esque episodes where him and all of the other ushers were back at school, like they had done something. This brings me to my next piece of evidence, or maybe even just a theory. I'm pretty sure that Jono and the other ushers, if they may have accidentally committed manslaughter or had killed someone when they were in their younger days, tend to play a lot of pranks on each other. And that's why him and all of these guys have such a tight bond together and why they're so obsessed with their time at school. So anyways, he's having these flashbacks, trying not to think about it. He's very much intoxicated. In the corner of his eye, he keeps seeing this massive something, like kind of like a ghost that's seeing him. And at first he's like, no, go away. And then like he's really angry at it and frustrated. And then he starts pleading with it, saying, I'm sorry, it wasn't my fault. I didn't mean for whatever to happen. Yeah, it's not looking good for Jono at this point. Then the last chapter that I read was all about Jules. It just gives me the ick. Her and Charlie sneak away from the party to go hang out together because they're just such good friends. Ugh. And he's asking, do you really love Will? Do you really care about him? Or are you really happy with him? Like those kinds of questions. Like she's just really fed up with everyone asking those kind of questions. She implies that he's jealous of Will. And so she's like, oh yeah, Will's like fabulous or whatever. You're just jealous. And anyways, so it's just like a very awkward conversation and very charged with past romance, whatever past romantic feelings they had for each other. And it's just like, because you're getting married and you are already married with 2 kids. Like, just stop. She goes back to the bedroom where she shares an intimate moment with Will. She's in the shower. She's kind of hanging out and she smells something really awful in her room. So she opens up the window, but kind of thinking maybe it's just the sea breeze that's from the outside coming in. And so she opens it to smell, and it smells really fresh outside, and it just smells really gross and rotten, the way that the ocean can smell when it doesn't smell very pleasant. She's really confused, and she brushes up her leg against the bed and she feels something like a dead body, dead flesh, and she's freaking out. So she screams at Will. She's like, oh my gosh, there's something in the bed. He rips it off, and it looked like there's an octopus in the bed, like someone had put some sort of a sea creature, an octopus, a squid, something like that in the bed. And so she's freaking out, and he takes a closer look, and it turns out it's just seaweed. And someone played a prank on them. And so Will's not freaking out at all. He's like, oh, this is totally something that the usher done or would be doing at this time. It's no big deal. Jules is really freaking mad. She's mad about this whole situation, okay? She's like, this is not funny. This is our wedding night. This is not a time to be pulling pranks. And she's about ready to march up there, pull them all out of bed and give them a talking to. And Will's like, no, chill out. Like, it's fine. I'll take care of it. I'll talk to them in the morning. I'll get us new bedding. It's fine. And this entire time she's thinking, wow, he is just so perfect for me. Like, he balances out like my crazy rage that I have. And he's always so calm and ambitious. And so she's just really torn at this point because she very much loves him and is feeling those feelings of, wow, we're perfect together. But at the same time, the note is lagging in the back of her mind where it's saying, he's a liar, he's a cheater, call it off. Like, you should not be in a relationship with this person. And so that's kind of what's in the back of her head. And this comes to my next prediction / piece of evidence. I'm pretty sure that the note is from 3 different people. I'm suspecting 3 different people. I haven't decided exactly who it is yet. One, Jono, because he had PTSD stuff that's going on. And I think, I don't know, he just like cares so deeply about Will that like maybe he has feelings for Will. It just seems like Jono and Will are closer than any of the other guys that they went to school with. So I feel like there may be some hidden feelings in that sense. And so he's wanting her to call it off for those reasons. I feel like it's kind of meh that it's from him at this point. The 2 people that it could possibly be from that are more or less connected are Olivia and Jules' mom. If I'm correct that Will is Steven, then there would be good reason for Olivia to say, hey, he is a liar and a cheat. Like, he was with me when he was with you, or like he left me to be with you, or whatever that situation was. And mom is involved. Mom knows what happened with Olivia. I've read stuff from this author, read stuff from this author before. The parents are very much involved and are like ride or die with their kids. And so I wouldn't be surprised if there was some sort of a trope where mom was trying to help cover up something that happened with Olivia, or, you know, whatever bad things are happening to Olivia, she's trying to make it right and then committing murder. Again, Will has not died yet, but I'm 90% sure that he will. All right, and this is where I get to decide who goes where after reading that set of chapters. I will say at this point though, Charlie and Jules, I don't think are as suspicious to me anymore. I really do think that he's a red herring. And Charlie is going to move to just a little bit sus. Well, both Jono and Olivia, I think, are going to be moved to more of the top suspect area. All right. I'll see you in 30 pages. All right, for this next update, I really do feel like there wasn't a lot of evidence, but just a lot of vibes and feelings that are kind of leading us towards certain suspects. We had a pretty short chapter with Aoife. They're about to go to bed after everyone has kind of calmed down a little bit. And her and Freddie hear something outside the window. And so she goes to go investigate. They didn't necessarily say banshee in the book, but it's like a crying woman, like seeing ghosts and that kind of stuff. There's a lot of historical death on this island, not just because it's an old island, but because like the bog and how everything was made, it just kind of sucks people in. And so there's probably a lot of bodies that are hidden on the island, as well as there were other tragedies that have happened on the island as well. Anyways, so she is kind of feeling that ghostly presence as she's wandering around outside trying to find whatever was making this human noise, and determined it sounded like crying. And so she ended up stumbling upon Jono, which makes sense because last time we saw him, he was freaking out in his bedroom thinking that he had seen a ghost. And so like he's talking to her and he's kind of trying to play it off like, oh yeah, it wasn't whatever. Like she can definitely tell that like he's seen a ghost. Like he just has that sense about him. And then we're back over to Hannah. She wakes up pretty early after all the partying and everything. And she's feeling a certain way towards Charlie, towards her husband. She's like, hey, you feeling anything today? He pretty much just blows her off and is too tired to be doing anything. And so she's feeling a little bit butthurt. She gets up and Aoife tells her about this one hike walk situation that she can go along, but be careful. And as she's following the directions, kind of detours a little bit to the cemetery where Aoife had been earlier. So I'm pretty they didn't explicitly say that, but I'm connecting the dots where Hannah is finding the same tombstone that Aoife was looking over. So at this point, I'm pretty sure the gravestone is Aoife's child. Hannah was looking at the dates and it seemed like a child, and the child was lost at sea. I'm not really sure how all of this necessarily connects at this point, and it just seems like background information, but maybe it'll end up being something more important. Anyways, so she's going on this walk. She goes up to the top of the hill, calls her mom who's watching her kids, kind of checks in on them a little bit. And maybe this is just like a little bit of foreshadowing, a little bit of breadcrumb sprinkling, but as she's like talking to her kids on the phone, she's thinking how she has such a stronger connection to her own flesh and blood, her own blood family, and talked about this connection that she felt like she had with her sister, which implies that the sister may have passed away. Feeling of, I am the mother, you are the child, and I'm here to protect you, and I have this strong bond towards you. I think that's going to kind of connect later on between, if my theory is correct, between Mom, Jules, and Olivia, especially if Will is in the doghouse at this point and messed up. She's at the top of the hill, calling, checking in on her kids. On her way down, she steps in the wrong place and gets stuck in the bog, and it's like just swallowing her whole at this point. Like it's up to her thighs, and she's freaking out. She's like, oh my gosh, this is really bad. So she starts yelling for help and can't hear anybody over the wind and stuff that's coming in. And then after a minute, Pete and Duncan come across her and pull her out. She kind of had the thought process of, how long did you watch me struggle before you stepped in for help? Because she had this feeling that she was being watched the entire time too. They pull her out. She ends up being okay, but she's just kind of has the heebie-jeebies a little bit, not just because she got stuck in the bog, but she just doesn't like the vibe of those two ushers. Next up, we have Aoife again and her perspective. She's getting ready for the entire day. It's now the day of the wedding, so she's doing a bunch of prep. Will comes in looking for some of his ushers. He tells Aoife about the prank that someone pulled on him and Jules, and he's looking for some of his ushers. She hasn't seen them, and he starts to try to make a little bit of small talk with her, trying to pry into her personal life a little bit, and she is not having it. She's like, absolutely not. In her head, like she's not doing this out loud, but in her head, she's like, this is a purely business relationship. You are my guests. I am the provider here. And so she's answering his questions, but very short and not giving him any information. He's asking about her connection to the island. And again, she came here as a kid, and so she's very familiar with the island itself and a lot of crazy stuff that goes on the island as well. But again, she's not really sharing any of this with him. It's just like, yep, okay, I need to go back and start prepping for your wedding. Peace out. It wasn't just about him prying into her personal information. She felt like there might have been an ulterior motive to it. Just trying to figure out why he's asking these specific background questions about her. Now we flash forward again to later that day at the wedding night as well. And it's the ushers going out with their torches, trying to see who screamed in the night. Is there a body? What are we looking for? Fergus is really creeped out. Where are you? Fergus, duh. Not Fergus. Angus. Gosh, Janie. Anyways, Angus is super creeped out, and they're excited to be going out and figuring out whatever the heck is going on here. And at one point, they hear one of them yell or scream, and Pete has been caught in the bog. He has one foot that's super deep in and is sucking him in. It's just like a really cool chapter in the sense where it doesn't add a ton of information of what's going on. It's adding to that spooky feeling and the suspense. Because as they're pulling him out of the bog, they're all kind of thinking in the back of their minds, there are all of these bodies and people of centuries and centuries back that are buried here, or this is their last resting place. They're trying not to think of all the creepy stuff that's going on underneath them. And that brings us to about halfway through the book. All right, at this point, I think I'm feeling more solidified in my suspect list. I'll go into more detail through my predictions section that I'm doing with all of the other people in the book club. But at this point, it's going to stay firmly Jules, Olivia, and Mom. I think Jono is really suspicious as well. He is creepy as heck. At this point, I don't think he's actually done anything. Let me rephrase that. I don't think he's actually done anything to Will. I think he has his own ghosts and things that he is really focused on and haunting him. So things are staying put, at least for now. Some of the other people in the book club have agreed to do a predictions questionnaire, try to predict what happens at the end of the story. It'll be really fun to see everyone's videos as they're talking about this and see where everyone's thought process is, just following the trail of breadcrumbs and seeing where it leads everyone.
I'm not used to recording myself. This is so weird. Okay, we are reading The Guest List by Lucy Foley, and I have read to page 144. I've actually read it 3 times and took notes, and I have many, many thoughts.
But then it'll also be fun to have this copy and then at the actual book club to talk about what we thought was going to happen and have that documented and written down versus what actually happened in the book. So the first question is, who do you think is responsible and what clues led you to that prediction? At this point, my top theory is actually 3 people that are all kind of working in tandem together. That's Olivia, Jules, and their mom. Pretty much Olivia's whole experience of having a relationship with an older man and having that kind of a connection very much is inferring that probably is Will. I think that is the main evidence and backstory that is leading me to that conclusion.
I have genuinely no idea. I have read a book by Lucy Foley before, and I know that there are clues leading up to it the entire time, but you really don't know what's going on until the very end. So don't know who it would be. I think that there are lots of characters that have secrets. There are lots of characters could have a motive. I don't know who's dead, so that really opens up the possibility for it to be anybody. My main theory right now, which is just a total guess, would be that it would be the bride, and that's mainly just because on multiple occasions she has had to calm herself down from having physical and violent outbursts, smashing things, throwing things. She really seems to have kind of a lot of anger bubbling really close to the surface that for now she has a lid on, but who knows what's going to happen later, especially since it is the wedding night, which is going to be the most stressful night. Certain people might have secrets come out that make her very angry, or someone might be threatening to reveal her secret. I don't know.
Question number 2 is, what do you think really happened during the crime or the main event? The main crime hasn't actually happened yet in the book. Nobody has actually died. 90% sure it's going to be Will. I think what happened was Olivia and him had a relationship together, and it might have been at the same time as Will and Jules also having a relationship together. Either that or he switched from Olivia to Jules. And I can't remember exactly how Jules and Will met. It's going to kill me until I'm able to talk about it with everyone and people can correct my memory. But I think what really happened was Jules is going to find out that Olivia / their mom is the person who wrote the note. It's going to come out why she wrote the note, and she's going to confront Will. She's going to off him. I think that's what's going to happen.
Again, I really have no idea. If I'm going with my bride theory, I think that it was just an accident in the moment. A confrontation happened between the bride and someone else. It ended up in someone dying.
Next question. Is there a clue that seems unimportant now but might matter later? They're leaving a little trail of breadcrumbs about Aoife possibly having a child that died prematurely. It's like haunting and maybe more backstory-esque. I feel like there's going to be something that connects it to the bigger story. I'm not sure about it yet, but that's going to be my best guess.
I am very interested in the wedding planner because she seems very disconnected from everything else that's going on. Everybody else, knows each other, has some history, is connected to the group in some way through this wedding, but the wedding planner is simply someone who's hired, someone who didn't know the bride or the groom before this event and is purposely keeping herself away from the group. Like, she has set herself that her role is to be in the background, facilitating everything, making it run smoothly, making it be exactly how they want it to be without herself being noticed. So I'm very interested to see how she fits into this. There really hasn't been much about her. I think that said that she vacationed on this island as a kid, and so I think that she has a history with the island, maybe a history with the original settlers of the island that were the victims of the massacre and others who left the island. I'm very interested on why the people left that island, because it was like hinted at a couple of times that, they left because they wanted plumbing and electricity, but then the man who brings them over on the boat was seems like that's not the reason, but then he got distracted and so we didn't find out why. Very interested in that. I think she might have some history with whatever happened that caused them to leave. I also think that she had either a child that died or maybe a sibling of hers died when they were young. She has a connection to a grave that's on the island, the grave of a young child, and it is said that she had something bad happen in her past that seems a little bit unconnected from her husband as well. So I'm thinking that maybe if it was her child, it was not the child of her current husband. If it wasn't her child, if it was her sibling or something, then obviously he's a little bit more disconnected from that. But I think there's a lot going on there. I just don't have any idea what that would have to do with the rest of the wedding party. And so I'm very interested to find out what that might be.
Question 4. Do you think the crime was planned or spontaneous, and why? I think given that Jules she's a very calculating person, but she's also just full of rage and anger. Like, has really tried to hide that from Will. And so I think when something really big like this comes out, I don't think she's going to mean to have killed him. I think it's going to be a spur of the moment, passion, heated argument that escalates.
I kind of said this earlier. I think that it was spontaneous just because, I guess, what's your definition of planned? It might have been planned, that night, but I don't think anyone came to this wedding planning on committing a murder. I think that someone's secret is going to come out or some information is going to be revealed that makes someone angry or makes someone scared because their secret is going to be out, and during a confrontation in the heat of the moment, maybe they're scared about something that someone's going to say, someone ends up dead.
Question number 5. What motive do you think will be revealed later in the story? Again, I'm pretty sure it's just going to be, you freaking had a relationship with my 19-year-old sister, and I think that's going to be motive enough. And he hid it from her.
I think every character has some motive going on. From what we've learned, everybody has a secret and some things going on in their life. I think motive for a murder, I think the bride, like I talked about before, her anger. I think if something pushes her far enough, she might lash out in a physical way that might cause, a death. For the best man, I think his motive would be to keep a secret. I think that he, the best man, and Will, the groom, somehow were involved in or caused the death of a classmate when they were in school. That there was like a hazing, because the boys have talked a lot about hazing that went on back when they were in school. Happened very frequently. They were hazing this kid and an accident happened and he died. And I think that the best man feels very guilty about that, but I also don't think that he's told anyone. I think that it's a secret between him and Will only. Secret seems to be really haunting him right now, so I don't know if, he just reaches his breaking point, or if I don't know if someone's gonna threaten to tell his secret and he gets scared, but that's a motive that he could have. Now this is interesting. I think that Bridesmaid has actually slept with Will because she tells Hannah about this story about how her boyfriend dumped her and she was really sad, and so she joined the dating app and she met this guy who was about 15 years older than her. She gave him a secret name, like fake name. They slept together, met up and slept together on multiple occasions. And also at the beginning of the book, Will talks about how he frequented the apps. He was on the apps a lot, talked about how it was really fun, but there were a lot of crazy, clingy girls on these apps. The bridesmaid admits when she's telling Hannah the story that she kind of went crazy when this guy ghosted her, texted him and called him in like the middle of the night and constant. And so that seems pretty clingy to me. So it really seems like Will and the bridesmaid were describing each other secretly. I don't think anyone else really knows. So if this secret were to come out, that might cause some anger, a fight between her and the bride, fight between other people, someone might get hurt. I think that would be a motive for the bridesmaid. To me, as of this point in the book, I love the +1. I think she is kind of the most innocent, which makes sense because she is the +1. She has, out of the guests and not the wedding planner and her husband, the actual people coming to this wedding and involved in it, she's the least attached, has the least history with them, and so I think, to me, seems the most innocent. But I do think that she is a little bit resentful of the life that she has now. I think she had a lot of fun in her younger years. She has kids now. She's been forced to be a lot more responsible. She's not very happy with her husband, but she wants to be. But her husband is very close with the bride, and it seems like there is some history there. He's not being the best husband to the +1, and I think that could create some anger or heartbreak in her if he does or says something about how maybe she doesn't measure up to the bride or something like that. Again, kind of heat of the moment thing. I don't know. I don't think that it's her. I might eat my words later if it does end up to be her. I really like her, and I don't think simply because she seems a little bit more on the outs of this group, I don't think that it would be her. But maybe it would be because she's not so in the group. I don't know.
Question 6. Who has the strongest reason to lie or mislead others? Jono. I think at this point, him and the other ushers, and probably Will as well, all have this big burden and secret that they're carrying. They probably had a hand in someone's untimely demise. And so I think they're going to really want that to stay hidden.
Again, kind of all of those secrets that I just talked about. I think the bride has feelings for Charlie. I don't know if they're current feelings or they're more just kind of lingering from the past type feelings, but either way, she is holding on to these in a way that I think will affect the fact that she's in a different romantic relationship currently and that Charlie is also married. I think even if it's simply lingering feelings from the past, the two of them are letting this be a thing and they're trying to hide that. Bridesmaid, again, I think she had this relationship with Will before Will ever met the bride, and she obviously hasn't told her sister about that. Unless her sister does know and is just fine. It seemed like, based on when the bridesmaid was telling her story, that she had not told anyone at least certain parts of the story. The best man, again, I think he and Will were involved in the death of a classmate when they were back in school. That is a secret that he is hiding from everyone other than Will. I think the wedding planner is just a private person. I don't really necessarily think she's hiding much. It's just she doesn't know these people on the island. They're all strangers to her. They're her clients. She's trying to make them happy, but she has no reason to tell them her personal history. But I think she is very private and so is therefore kind of hiding certain things like her history with the island and whatnot. And the plus one, again, she's kind of the most outs on the group, doesn't have as much connection with them. I think the main thing that she's hiding from them is how she feels insecure. She feels like she doesn't fit in here. She feels like she's kind of lost herself in becoming a mother and a wife. And here on this island, she's not really in her mother role right now. Her kids are not with her. Her husband's kind of going off and doing his own thing. So she's kind of having to sit with herself for the first time in what seems like a long time. And I think she's having a bit of a difficult time with who she is. And I don't think she's really, being super open about that with all of these other guests because they're not really her friends. They're more connected to her husband, which I think she's dealing with those internally.
7. Do you think there will be a major plot twist soon, and what might it be? I think the plot twist that's going to come out is that Will is actually Stephen, the older man that Olivia was having a relationship with.
I think the big twist in the book that's coming up will probably be the relationship between the bridesmaid and Will. And I keep bringing this up, but to me, that is a really big deal. And I think that will be a very big reveal later in the book because, again, the clues have been very separate. The bridesmaid told this story saying a name for the man that was not Will, that she hooked up with. Will very briefly talked about the apps, talked about some crazy clingy girls on the apps. And so I think the big reveal is being oh, these two people are talking about each other.
Question 8. Could the obvious suspect be a red herring? Why or why not? Charlie, from the very start, was the lead suspect and the obvious red herring. He's pretty much the only person that she's actually friends with. There's this romance and chemistry and history that's behind them. He very much feels very protective of her and makes it very obvious that he does not like Will.
I don't really think that there is an obvious suspect, not to me. At least. There are people that I feel like are less likely to have done it. I'm not really feeling much of the wedding planner and the plus one. Again, they're the most outs of the group. They have the least connections there. They have the least amounts of secrets, at least so far. But out of everybody else, they all have what seems to be pretty big secrets. They got a lot going on. So it could be any of them. So I don't really think that there's any one particular suspect to be a red herring, in my own personal opinion.
Question 9. What secret do you think is going to come out next? I think Will's infidelity and his identity as actually being Stephen is going to be the secret that comes out next.
It could be any of them. Could be the thing about the bridesmaid and Will. It's kind of been implied that the bride and Charlie have slept together, but it was not really confirmed to any of the other characters, so that could happen. I think the cause of the death of the classmate for Will and the best man and all the ushers, I think that could be a big reveal that could come next. I don't know which order it would be, but all of those would have to have a reveal. I've thought about this so much that I'm convinced that this is exactly how the book is going to go, and I think it might be kind of hard for me if these aren't right. I might be but wait. Yeah, because I read the first part of the book 3 times. The last time I took notes while listening to it. It's been a month of me thinking about this. All of the things, all of the connections, everything like that. And so if I'm wrong, I don't know how I'm going to feel about that. But I am very excited to finish this book and see what actually happens.
All right, it is officially the wedding day. Jules wakes up, she's starting to get ready, and as she is fumbling around with her makeup bag, it falls to the floor, and the note pops out. It brings back all of those negative emotions that she was feeling when she initially got it. And she's thinking back about probably just like some crazy fan of Will's and thinks that she knows them and all of these different things. So she's trying to calm her nerves, but it really, really upsets her. Then we flash forward to the wedding night again, and it's back to the ushers. They're braving the storm. It's super windy, just spooky in general. And Duncan is trying to make light of the situation. He brings up a kid that they used to go to school with that, and now I can't remember, or maybe they didn't specifically say, but implied that he was either killed or hurt during Survive the Night game. And then they see someone in the distance. Someone approaches, and it is Freddie, and he's holding something, and they made it sound like it was super menacing. In reality, I think it was just a cheap cliffhanger. At least so far, we haven't figured out what is going on with Freddie or what he's holding, but it does make him just a little bit more suspicious. And then we were back to Olivia. Again, it's the day of the wedding. She's kind of freaking out a little bit. She can't will herself to put on the outfit. She's just thinking over and over again about whatever it is that she hasn't told Hannah, and she actually sneaks up to Hannah's room, and she's like, I'm just going to confess. I just have to get it off my chest. But as she's getting there, the doors crack and Hannah and Charlie are in a fight. And so she doesn't feel like that she can really insert herself into this situation. But she does end up running into Will during that whole thing as she's like eavesdropping, but we don't actually hear anything of what's going on. And it's kind of an awkward interaction. Then we have a super quick chapter bouncing back to Aoife. She's standing on the beach, welcoming all the guests that are coming in on the boats, and Maddie, who's one of the captains of the boat, is bringing them. And when they had listened to the weather report earlier in the day from the mainland, it sounded like it was just going to be windy. It wasn't going to be all that big of a deal. But Maddie's like, well, I mean, just look on the horizon. Like, it's stormy. There's going to be a storm blowing in. I love the scene that it sets where it's like, ooh, this is so spooky. Then we bounce over to Jono's perspective. Him and Will are getting married. Him and Will are getting dressed. Now, I can't remember if I said it earlier, but Jono lost his suit, and so he's wearing one of Will's spares. And so it's super tight on him, and he just feels really dumb. It doesn't fit him properly. He doesn't look as good compared to Will or even any of the other groomsmen. He's telling Will how grateful he is that he's, and honored that he is to be the best man. Flashes back to when Jono pressured Will to making him the best man. He found out about their wedding in the newspaper. And so he called Will up for drinks. Was like, hey, I'd be honored to be your best man. And just kind of brings it up. And Will's like, oh yeah, sure, of course. Who else would be my best man? Ugh. Again, we see a lot of comparisons between Jono and Will, where Jono's comparing himself to Will. And he's like, Will's just like the perfect person, but he has his secrets too. Now it's 30 minutes before the wedding, and Jules is picking a fight with her dad. Now remember, her dad has only met Will once, and it was literally the night before. And Jules just really cares about what her dad thinks, and she knows that she shouldn't be asking him this, but she asks her dad, hey, what do you think of Will? And her dad's being kind of cagey, being like, well, I don't really know him, so it more so matters about what you think of him, and you have a really good sense for people. So dad's trying to play it off, but Jules is mad. I just want you to love me. I want you to approve of me. And so she's feeling really angry at this point. So she excuses herself to go and destroy stuff for a little bit. Just adds on to the piece of evidence that we have earlier that she has anger issues. So right now she has this view of Will that he is absolutely perfect. And it kind of goes on to say that in the book too, because she's feeling angry, she's feeling really frustrated, and she walks down the aisle, she sees his face, it's like everything melts away, everything's perfect, and everything's gonna be okay. So imagine having this person be your safe space, and then to find out that he freaking lies to you. Because I'm pretty sure that's what happened. Pretty sure that they had a relationship with each other. Her anger issues, I feel like, are a really strong indicator that she probably did something to him. All right, last section. We have Hannah's perspective. She's sitting in the pews. She's not sitting next to Charlie because Charlie's part of the wedding party, so she's kind of crammed in the back. And everything went perfectly. It was flawless. They were gorgeous. All the people around them are beautiful. And again, she compares herself and she's feeling pretty inadequate. Once the actual wedding ceremony is done, she starts to mingle with some of the other guests, and again, just feels like really out of it because they're such posh people, and she tries to kind of insert herself into conversations or have people talk to her, and it's not really working out. And she eventually talks to Will's dad, which at this point I should probably put a picture of him up here, but like I don't think he has anything to do with it. But anyway, she talks to Will's dad, and he is just like this menacing, scary person. She asks an innocent question. She's like, oh, you must be so proud of your son. And he's like, why would I be proud of him? And she's like, well, they're getting married, but then also he is on this successful TV show. And dad's like, well, he could have been a lawyer, or he could have been in politics or something like that. And he just like very disappointed in the life trajectory that Will has taken. Because you also have to remember that Will's dad was his headmaster. She finishes talking to him, goes to find Charlie. Where's Charlie? Hello. Finishes talking to him and goes to find Charlie, where he's talking with some of the other groomsmen and just some of the other guys. And she's picking up on little hints that he has been drinking. There's very subtle cues of it that she's learned to pick up on, and you can tell it's from trauma. He becomes a completely different person when he drinks, so that's pretty scary. But one of the other guys that was in the little group that she was talking to brought up the stag night, which is like their bachelor party. She's like, yeah, he won't talk to me about it. I don't know what happened. It seemed like something really sketchy went on. Like, she doesn't say that, but like that half part of it. But she's like asking about it because Charlie never has talked to her about it. The guy's like, oh, boys will be boys. You know what happens at stag night stays at stag night. And you can just tell that like Charlie is switched off. He's become a different person. He's drunk, bringing up that memory. Very traumatic. So that brings us to our next piece of evidence. Because again, I feel like he's the red herring. But whatever happened at the stag night combined with his alcohol issues, I think may lead to something happening with Will. So, I mean, that could be a motive. Like, if him and the other groomsmen were absolutely trash to him, then I don't know, like maybe if he gets drunk enough, he'd do something. At this point, I don't know if I want to move anybody around still. Like, the only one I could possibly move is maybe Freddie because of this weird cliffhanger that they left us on. But I feel like in 2 pages or in like a couple of chapters, whenever that part pops up again, like I feel like it's going to be nothing. You know what? Never mind. I'm just going to keep him here. But what I will do is move Duncan because I've kind of been leaving him on the back burner. I was like, oh, the ushers in general are just kind of him in particular is just kind of creepy and I don't like him. I don't think he actually has done anything. When it comes to Will's murder, I don't think he has anything to do with it, but he definitely has something to do with something. Like whatever happened back at school with that one boy playing Survive the Night, Charlie and everything that's going on with there, and just like the weird vibes that Hannah has picked up off of Duncan and some of the ushers. Yeah, I'm just feeling pretty confident with my choice here at this point. All right, we start off with Jono. Jono's is kind of a big chapter. Everyone's mingling about the wedding party, and he is throwing them back. And the entire time he's just feeling incredibly insecure. Most of the guests are from this posh school. He's trying to interact with them and is just feeling really awkward and insecure. He wants to bring up his whiskey business, but can't really seem to insert himself into any of these conversations. As different guys from the school are talking, he's thinking back specifically to this one photo of when he went to that school with all the boys in it. And he's like, oh, this person is 3rd row, 5th on the left, and is doing that with each of the different people that are talking. But he's trying not to imagine one of the boys in particular, which was a couple of years younger. I think I mentioned him earlier about always following Will around. And Jono just talks about all the awful things they had this poor kid do who just wanted to be liked. Whether that was stealing or just doing stuff to embarrass him, pushed and pushed and pushed, and this kid would literally do anything, which kind of implies that whatever happened with Survive the Night probably ended with this kid either dying or being seriously injured. So he's trying not to think about that, but he is thinking about it. And then he bumps into Will's dad. Menacing Mr. Headmaster Man. Probably should have a picture of him up here, but we'll just pretend. And he basically confronts Jono about how he knows that he stole these test papers, which would have been this huge scandal. The headmaster ended up covering it up for him, and Jono denies it. It's this big test that I'm assuming that they take in the UK. I imagine it would be similar to our SATs or ACTs, and I guess he had stolen, presumably, the answer keys. He denies it, moves on, and then that producer... I knew it was going to come back to the producer. The producer that Will was worried about at the beginning ends up talking to Jono, and Jono's like, I don't get why you're talking to me. Like, this is really awkward. You told me that you didn't want me to be on the show. Like, you screencasted me and everything, and you didn't want me. He's also reflecting back about how this TV show idea was originally Jono's idea, not Will. Jono was the one that brought it up, and then Will kind of made it happen and got the ball rolling on it. And when they screen tested together, then the producer had emailed Jono saying, we're not interested in you, sorry. So the boy has been brought up multiple different times by multiple different ushers, and even Will. Definitely something suspicious happened with that, and they are covering it up for each other, which I think is part of the reason why Will has kept Jono around, because even though he doesn't seem to actually like him all that much, he's like keeping him attached enough that Jono isn't going to rat on him, but he's not actually being his friend either. Another little tidbit, when Jono had brought up this idea for the TV show and brought it up to Will, Will was like, oh my gosh, that's an amazing idea. And Jono had even thought, but is it because of what happened to the kid? And then Will was like, no, it was so long ago. It was an accident. Like, it wasn't anything. There's stuff that's buried deep down. All right, then we have a very quick pop over to Aoife. All of the guests were trying to wander out of the tent area, and she's corralling them back in. She's like, hey, like, maybe let's not wander the grounds that are A, dangerous, but B, they're specifically trying to go over to the graveyard site, where it is also very obvious that she likely has a child that's buried there. And so she's like, I don't really want people knowing my business and putting 2 and 2 together. And this is when the crap starts hitting the fan. We find out that the rest of the story that Olivia hasn't been telling is that she was pregnant. She tells us that she was pregnant and had an abortion. The father was Stephen, which is really Will. 90% sure. I'm gonna really be eating my shorts if that isn't fact. Anyways, so she's really overwhelmed with the whole wedding party. She goes out to the ocean, the beach, and she goes out into the water. All right, then we pan over to Jules' perspective and Will's. They're finishing having their pictures taken. They join the guests. They're having a lovely time until Will notices that Jono and the producer are chatting with each other. And he's like, oh my gosh, that's going to be so awkward that they're talking to each other since, Jono didn't get accepted to be on this TV show. I'm going to go rescue them. And Jules is like, they're both adults. This is our wedding. Hang out with me, maybe? I don't know. So he heads over there. She's kind of miffed about the whole situation and then realizes a bunch of the guests are all gathered together and they're looking off into the ocean and it looks grim. She pushes her way to the front and realizes that it's Olivia that's drowning in the water. So she books it down to the beach along with the ushers and Will. And Will is the one that actually pulls Olivia out of the water and rescues her. Again, it kind of goes along with my theory, but she was fighting him. She did not want to be pulled out of the water. She is actively scratching at him. So she either really doesn't want to be saved or he is Stephen. I'm pretty sure he's Stephen. She's getting pulled out of the water. Hannah is super worried about her. And at this point, Jules makes a flip from being super concerned for her sister, being like, oh, this is such an attention stunt. And so she makes that kind of a snarky comment to Hannah, being like, you shouldn't be giving her any more attention. She's had plenty of it growing up from our mother that she never gave me. A lot of the other guests had made their way down to the beach, and Aoife does some crowd control and damage control and herds everyone back up to the tents. And now this is where things get really good. As Jono and the producer are chatting it up, and Jono's like, hey, so don't you think it's kind of weird that you're like trying to be all chatty and friendly with me and talk to me about all of this stuff when you didn't want me to be on the show? Like, isn't that weird? And the producer's like, what do you mean? We thought you didn't want to be on the show. And Jono's like, no, I wanted to be on the show. You guys emailed me that you didn't want me to be on the show. And the producers are like, we emailed you that we wanted you to come to this meeting about the show because we wanted you to be on there. It was going to be opposites attract. Will, the pretty boy, and Jono, the rugged nature guy. We wanted both of you on the show. And Jono's like, huh. Now that I think of it, you never actually had my email, did you? You talked everything through Will and his agent. So that means that Will got in the way of Jono being on this TV show. So the motive now is very, very clear on Jono's part. He is pushed off of this TV show. He wasn't going to amount to anything. He's kind of doing this whiskey thing. He's feeling really insecure about everything. And the one thing that he's actually good at, the nature stuff and being rustic and outdoorsy, rock climbing and all of these things, that's his thing. And Will got the TV show because he's better looking. So he's mad. Yeah, it's not looking too good for Jono. I almost feel like he's going to be the red herring because it's like everything is leading up to him being the person that offs Will. I don't know. It could still go either way at this point, but I feel like because they're leading with him so hard, it might not actually be him. Last part of the section, and kind of a sad part too, Hannah can tell that Olivia is not okay. So Hannah goes and kind of finds her, sits down with her, and tells her her own personal story about her own sister. How her own sister was perfect and had all of these things going for her and was going to go into politics and always had really good grades and was always a really good kid. She didn't feel comfortable talking with her sister or anyone else in her family about this awful thing that had happened to her at uni. Her boyfriend at the time took some pictures of her and posted them on the internet that were not good. And she doesn't tell Olivia this, but she basically is like, hey, like if there's something that you need to talk about, please talk about it and just get it out there because there's people who love and support you. In the back of her head, she's like, I don't want you to do something harmful like my sister did because her sister ended up passing away. It's just, there's so many things building up to pin it all on Jono that it just makes me think that it's not him anymore. I really do feel like it's probably Olivia, but I'm leaving Jono here just because there is so much evidence that's piling up against him at this point, so much circumstantial evidence. I don't think Hannah is even suspicious at all. Charlie and Duncan are fine to stay in, just a little bit sus. Yeah, when it really comes down to it, I think it's the two sisters and then the mom has something to do with it as well. And I think she's going to help try to cover up the situation. I really like how I've had Will under the victim this entire time and he's not even dead yet. I'm just pretty sure that he's going to be the one that dies. I've only read 5 chapters and everything has been blown out of the water. Everything is out in the open now. Short chapter from Aoife. She's feeling really guilty about not predicting about what Olivia was going to do. And I think mainly it's because, one, she's kind of a control freak. Same, sis. Where she knew that something was off with Olivia. But she is also alluding back to likely when her child, again, isn't quite out in the open yet, but her child probably passed away from a drowning incident. And so she feels like she should have been able to predict it because it was a similar instance of almost drowning. All right, back to the wedding night. The ushers are out. Freddie finds him and it turns out he's not carrying anything super menacing. It's just a flashlight or a torch.
I don't know, they call them both. They call it a torch as a flashlight, but then they also had physical torches as well. So it's kind of confusing. Freddie is telling the ushers, hey, you need to come back. The waitress just came to and said she didn't just see the body out there. She also saw someone else. And so they're implying that something nefarious probably happened. The ushers talk amongst themselves. Some of them still want to keep going and pretty much talk themselves out of it. And then they realize that Pete is gone. He was more under the influence compared to others. Now they lost track of him. The next part is from Jules' perspective. Her dad gets up to give a speech and basically is just gushing over about how proud he is of her. And at first she's kind of angry about it because she just feels like none of it is super sincere. But then at one point he explicitly says, I am proud of you. And she starts crying. Then he specifically talks to Will during his speech and is like, hey, Will, you seem like a pretty okay guy, but if you do anything to hurt my daughter, I will kill you. Or something to that effect. Everyone kind of laughs it off, but Jules knows that he's not kidding. And here's where things really get juicy. Olivia's perspective, now it is Will's turn to give his speech. And at one point in the speech, he talks about how he went to Jules's, was it a publishing party? A magazine party of some sort. And how he was there with just a friend. And that friend had to leave, but he stayed. And that's how he met Jules. I knew it, 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 I knew it. Olivia's like, yep, Will is Steven. And on top of that, when he was dating Jules, never met, and then they got engaged, and then Jules is like, okay, I'm gonna introduce you to my family now. And she's like, okay, I'm gonna meet Jules' fiance. And then he walks in, and she's like, what? And Will doesn't react. Maybe an eye twitch. That's it. He doesn't react. She runs off. When they meet more formally, for the first time, he's like, oh, it's so nice to meet you for the first time. And she's like, am I crazy? Am I going crazy? What? And we're seeing things from Hannah's perspective. And Jono is now giving the speech. He's very much under the influence. And he's just very aggressively talking to Will throughout this whole thing. Like, oh yeah, we're best mates. We're best friends. And then he tells the whole story about how he forgot his suit when in reality, he was supposed to pay $800 for a suit, which he thought Will was going to pay for. And then when, they walk up to the cash register together, this super nice suit, Will's like, okay, you can pay for it now. And so Jono pays for it. And he's like, what? But it was $800. And so he came back the next day and returned it because he couldn't afford that, which is why he borrowed Will's suit and doesn't fit him properly and all of these things. And he's saying this in front of everybody. And he's kind of playing everything off like a joke, but like he's not joking. And then he gets up in Will's face and he's like, you would never do anything to betray me or hurt me, right? And Will is like literally forced to be like, no, of course not. Man, what? And then he gets all the ushers together so that way Will and them can go play survival one last time, even though it's kind of Will's whole job now to play that game. But anyways, put a blindfold on him with their ties and they carry him off to a cave. Tensions are high. Jono, Will, and the rest of the ushers are all in a cave together and they're like, oh, we're having such a good time. Oh my gosh, it's so funny. They put him in the cave and they all leave. And once all the other ushers have headed back, Jono sneaks back to confront Will and is like, I know everything. I know how you screwed me over with this whole TV deal. I've had your back when we did atrocious things. And on top of that, I couldn't afford the suit. I don't actually have a job. I got fired from the only job I really did like because I was stoned because of all the crappy stuff that we did in our youth and I can't sleep at night because of it. And also, did I mention my whiskey business is a sham? And I can't remember if it's the internal monologue or if he's actually saying this out loud. He's really wishing that he had just exposed everything during his speech, but that he's a coward, just like the night when they should have spoken up when all of the bad stuff happened. And one person did come forward, but no one believed him and he should have been the second person. Probably regarding the boy that either got killed or seriously injured. So yes, tensions are very, very high. All right, something you should know about Lucy Foley is that it's never the red herring. It's never the first person that you think is going to be it. And it's not even the second or third person. I've read multiple of her books and the way that it leads up is like it's the very last second that she reveals who the actual person is. And there's the teeniest little breadcrumbs that you wouldn't necessarily notice. So at this point, even though it's looking really bad for Jono and Olivia and like even Jules to a certain extent, I feel like there's a character I've been overlooking. And I guess we can start here. Jules' dad did threaten to kill Will. So whether it was in jest or it wasn't, he's getting moved to a little bit sus. So just because these characters have the most evidence doesn't mean it's actually going to be them. I'm trying to think, who have I overlooked at this point? I'm pretty confident at this point it's not Femi or Peter. We just don't have enough information about what is going on. It could be Dad. It could essentially be the flip situation that I was talking about where I was saying mom would do anything to back up her children. Maybe in this case, it's actually Dad. So like I could see something like that. But again, he hasn't been in the book enough to really lead to anything. Hannah, even though I like Hannah's character, unfortunately, I do feel like She's more a way to get information to us, like what is she observing, rather than actively participating in anything. The only thing I could actually see is Hannah maybe secret, super psychotic, super secret fan of Will. And so she kills him. Like, if I can't be with him, no one can be with him. I think I've said that earlier as well. But again, like, there's just not a lot to it. The only thing that we haven't seen come together at this point is Aoife, how the death of her child is somehow connected to all of this. Oh. Hold on, I'm piecing things together. Here's my new crazy theory. Don't have anything to back this up, but something happened to a boy. But then, do they come from wealth? Anyway, something happened to a boy at this prep school. Maybe that boy is Aoife's son, who died mysteriously at sea. But that's the only thing I could see coming out of left field, is that she's been watching Will for a while. She knows that he has something to do with the death of her son. And so when she saw that they were getting married and saw that Jules was looking for a wedding venue, because Jules put it up on her Instagram, she offered Jules half off of the whole price. She really wanted Jules to come. And it could be just to get positive publicity for the magazine, because she knew that Jules was going to put it into the magazine. But what if it wasn't really for that reason? What if it was really to lure them here so that way she could kill Will? There has to be a reason why her backstory about her losing a child is being brought up at this point. Oh my gosh, I'm gonna go crazy. Buckle up. I have now finished the book, and now I get to tell you exactly what happened. Also, I was right. Well, at least kind of. All right, we start off our last leg of the trip with Hannah. So Charlie's not doing so good. He's definitely under the influence, and him and Duncan get into a fight. Hannah breaks it up, asks Charlie what the heck happened on the stag trip that's caused so much tension between all of you guys. And he says they went camping, they went to an island, they went to another island in canoes, where they were all also under the influence at that point, and they dared Charlie to swim to a third island and back. And by the time he got back, they had left him stranded on this island, nearly freezing to death. They eventually came and got him, but he very much held the grudge against Will. Hannah didn't really believe him that it was Will's idea. It was probably Duncan or even Jono, someone else's idea, but Will didn't seem like the type of person to want to do that. And Charlie was getting mad, and he's like, well, you must really like Will. Like, I saw the way that you guys were making eyes at each other and flirting with each other, so obviously you wouldn't believe that it was Will. And then Hannah's like, in relation, she's like, I feel a little bit called out. But at the same time, you were also flirting with Jules the entire night. Not the wedding night, of course, but the previous to the wedding night. And she straight up asks them if they had done the hanky-panky together. And he is just so tired and wasted at this point that he is like, yeah, we did. She's like, when? When you guys were still teenagers? And he's like, no. And she's like, after we had been together? And he's like, yeah. And she's like, after we had our first kid together? And he's like, yeah. That's pretty messed up. Now we're back in the cave with Jono and Will, and Jono is basically confronting Will about everything. And it's not really a confrontation as much as venting and talking about all the awful things that they did. And it finally comes out that they were the cause of the death of the boy that they went to school with. This little boy that would follow them around had found the test papers that Will had stolen and confronted him about it and was like, this is cheating. You shouldn't be doing this. And then that night, Will and Jono kidnap him from his bed and decided it was time for this boy to play the survival game. So they kidnap him, they take him down to a beach, they tie him to a railing with shoelaces so it's harder to get himself untied, and then they left him there. From what it sounds like, Jono thought, oh, he'll eventually escape just like all the kids do. It's gonna be fine. But Will specifically chose shoelaces so it would be harder to escape. Jono wasn't thinking about the tide coming in until the next morning when it would have already been done and the kid drowned. So he's talking to Will about this. He's like, my life has been ruined ever since that happened and I've never forgiven myself from it. Well, you, on the other hand, pretend like it never even happened. It hasn't affected you or your career at all. Will is telling Jono that you're overreacting. It was so long ago, whatever at this point, showing zero remorse. It builds up to the point where you think that Jono is going to kill Will, and then Aoife comes in. Aoife comes in, it appears she hasn't heard anything, and is telling Will, hey, it's time to go cut the cake, let's go. I was certain that the little boy who had died, just like when I had talked about in the last recap, that the little boy who they had killed is her son. We have a weird little chapter from Aoife, who was just reminiscing on how you can plan a completely perfect day or a completely perfect event as long as all of the guests behave. And she talks about how they're getting rowdier and rowdier and more drunk. Now it's time for Jules and Will to have their first dance together. And Jules is really confused about the whole situation between the speech that Jono had and then him getting kidnapped for 30 minutes off to who knows where, which obviously we know, but she doesn't. And she's like, I really do feel like there's more to that. Like, it didn't seem like, oh, just a couple of gents having fun with each other. There was really something scary going on, and what the heck was that from? And she kept bringing it up. And Will is like, let it go. It's no big deal. Let it go. Let it go. And he snaps at her, which scares her because she's never seen that side of him. He apologizes, kind of smooths things over. And he's like, look, like, I get it. Jono is bringing up something in the past that really doesn't matter. There's nothing that he can hold over me. I'm going to be cutting him off. Hannah is now on the dance floor, and she's watching how Will is trying to force Olivia to dance with him, which I guess is some sort of a tradition or something that was brought up at some point, where the groom gets his pick of the bridesmaids, but there's only one bridesmaid, and she is very much trying to fight him, is not interested. And at that point, Hannah is starting to put two and two together about what she has said about Stephen and how Will and Jules met. Her thought process gets interrupted when she's asked to dance by a very handsome gentleman. At this point, she's really mad at her husband. She's like, I'm gonna go enjoy myself, which... As Will is trying to get Olivia to dance with him, she pulls away, doesn't want to think about anything. She's super upset with herself, and she's throwing drinks back of other people's drinks so she can get as incoherent as possible because she just doesn't want to think about things anymore. She gets pulled onto the dance floor, falls, hits her head, and then gets who comes to rescue her. Will pulls her up, is like, oh, let's go get you some fresh air. And he takes her to an isolated location. Jules, in the meantime, notices that Will goes missing, and so she tries to go find him, and she sees Will and Olivia tucking very closely together. And something in her gut says not to go interrupt them yet, and so she kind of creeps so that way she can eavesdrop a little bit. Olivia and Will are arguing. She's saying that she's going to finally come out with it. We were in a relationship. I'm going to tell Jules. I'm going to tell her what happened. And Will's like, no, you're not. You're too chicken to do that. If you were going to, you would have already told her at this point, babes. So I don't think you're going to tell her, okay? You're too much of a coward anyway. You're not going to ruin it for your big sis, right? Very much gets into Olivia's head, and Olivia is just freaking out. She's like, well, I have the text on my phone. I'm going to show her the texts. And Will snatches the phone out of her hand and throws it off the cliff, which, by the way, they are standing very close to a cliff right now. And he ends up grabbing her, and they're kind of doing this like weird struggle thing, and it kind of seems like she's going to get pushed off the cliff. Flash forward to later in the evening, we're back to the ushers. They find a crumpled gold crown that Jules was wearing and a missing shoe, which they can't remember who it belonged to, but it belongs to Olivia. And it fell off during the struggle with Will. All right, this one's a doozy. So Hannah, she's dancing with the stranger that asked her to dance. And as they're talking and chatting it up, she finds out that he knows Will through university. And he talks about how Will is so handsome and he's a ladies' man and all the girls wanted him, except for the one who got away. He didn't have a perfect streak. They talk about how this girl dumps Will, but Will had compromising pictures of her that had been posted on the internet, which we know is the exact same thing that happened to Hannah's sister. So the one that got away is Hannah's sister, and now Hannah has more motivation to off Will because her sister unalived herself because of what Will did to her. It's kind of getting to the point where there's so many reasons why we don't like Will anymore, and it's like, oh yeah, it totally makes sense why there's like 5 different people that could be trying to kill you. You are not a good guy, and we're kind of rooting for you to die at this point, not gonna lie. All right, fast forward to later in the evening. The ushers have now found a body. And it's presumably close to where the tiara and the shoe were found. Yes, they have found a body. And they haven't revealed who it is yet, but we all know who it is. Now, Aoife is talking about the cake cutting ceremony and the really overly large, sharp knife that is embedded with pearl details that Jules had specifically asked her to procure. And Freddie is like, man, like, be really careful with this knife. Obnoxiously sharp. It's made really more so for cutting meat, so just be really careful with that. Jules has overheard the entire conversation between Will and Olivia and knows that Will has been screwing her over this entire time. So she takes her tiara and she crumples it to the ground, decides that's not enough. Olivia realizes that Jules has seen them. There's no way that she could have overheard everything with the wind blowing, and Jules walks up and acts like she hasn't heard anything. She's like, hey, Will, it's time for the cake cutting ceremony. So I think earlier when I said it was time for the cake cutting ceremony, it was probably time for the first dance. Now it's time for the cake cutting ceremony. And she's all chipper, maybe a little bit stern, like, oh, where have you been, silly? And she's looking at Olivia, and Olivia can tell that something has shifted with Jules. She's not acting normal. The ushers have identified the body, and it is Will. And they don't realize there is an extra figure standing in the vicinity. Something interesting that happens is we finally get a peek into Will's psyche, and we get his perspective for the first time. And he's going over the things that Olivia has said and Jono has said. And I think he's freaking out, but at the same time, he's so cocky and narcissistic that he's like, I can handle this. This isn't gonna ruffle my feathers or anything. And ultimately, he decides that Olivia is not a threat. If she was going to say something, she would have by now. But he decides that Jono is unhinged and he needs to take care of him. Now the cake cutting ceremony has actually started. Hannah is eyeing out that real big knife that Aoife has procured. Jules and Will are cutting the cake, and Jules takes a big piece of this cake and shoves it in his face a little bit too aggressively. The rest of the crowd is like, is that as aggressive as it was supposed to be? Like, what was that? And Will plays it off like, oh, that's a good one. I'm gonna go wash up now. And then the lights go out. Jules is seething with anger. She feels like she's been fooled and underestimated, and she is just real mad. Internal dialogue. Lights go out. Jono's internal monologue. He regrets not killing Will in the cave. Then the lights go out. When the lights go out, Aoife speaks up and she's like, hey guys, it's all right. It's just the generators. I know the storm has been really difficult. Give it a minute. Will is in the bathroom cleaning up. It's his internal monologue. He's worried that because of the way that Jules is acting that she knows something. Then the lights go out. The ushers standing over Will's body. Then Jono emerges holding the knife. And he's like, guys, I tried to save him. I really did. And he's covered in blood. When Will is on his way back from the bathroom, Aoife says, hey Will, can you come help me for a second to get these generators up and going? And so as the knight in shining armor does, he goes to help her. And then she confronts him and she's like, hey Will, I just want to talk. Oh my gosh, I cannot tell you guys. Once I had that thought that maybe it was Aoife's son that was the one that died because of Jono and Will, I was like, oh my gosh, I solved it. I put everything together. I'm so smart. Not really, but anyways, okay. I'm getting ahead of myself. She's like, I just want to talk, okay? And he's like, what's this about? And she's like, look, I was the one that put the seaweed in the bed. And Will's like, what? And that doesn't make sense. It's something that we used to do to each other back in school. Like, you wouldn't know anything about that. And she's like, oh, but I do. You see, I do. You see, there's a little boy that you guys used to call Loner. His name's Darcy Malone. And you and Jono and the rest of the guys used to kind of pick on my son. And I have every single letter that he's ever written to me. And I keep saying son because at that point, that's where my brain was at. And I just forgot that Aoife is actually not as old as I had her pictured in my head. She's actually closer to everyone's ages here. She's Darcy's sister or Loner's sister. So she's like, yeah, so he used to write me letters all the time, okay? And I know all the stuff that you guys used to do to each other, including putting seaweed in each other's bed. And you know what else I also know that you guys did? I know that you guys are the reason why my brother drowned. There was also another younger kid that my brother was friends with. Oh yeah, that was my husband, Freddie. We used to call him Fat F-word. Yeah, do you remember that? Yeah, that's my husband now. So she's confronting him about all of this. He's denying it this entire time. And you can see just the little bit of glinty light from a knife. Oh, and the best part too is at this point, Will can't get away because his foot is now in the, what do they call it? Bog? Because his foot is now stuck in the bog. And you know how that kind of stuff is. It just sinks and you can't get out. So it's great because it can't get away. Jono is trying to explain to the other ushers. He's like, I didn't kill him. I found the knife in his body and I pulled it out, and I probably shouldn't have pulled it out because that made him die faster, but I just wanted to save him. Kind of. But he pulls the knife out. He knows it looks really bad that he did it, but he's not the one that did it. The policemen come and arrest him. Now we have Aoife's internal monologue, and she's like, you know, I really did only want to talk to Will initially. I offered my venue at a lower price to get them here. I really did just want to talk. But then I overheard Will and Jono in the cave, and at least Jono was remorseful about the whole thing, and it's really messed him up. But Will doesn't have any remorse. So I killed him. I plunged the dagger into his chest. And there's a line in there, she's like, I raised hell. And it's so good, because it's like full circle moment. Olivia's sitting there in the tent with all the people now that the police have arrived. And she's thinking, I didn't kill him, but I could have, and I wanted to. Then Jules comes up to her, gives her a really big hug, and is like, hey, I overheard what Will did to you. And if I had known, and then she couldn't get the words out, but it was pretty apparent that she was apologizing to her sister at that point. And the closing chapter of this story is from Hannah's perspective. Her and Charlie are on their way back to the mainland on a boat. It's obviously that they have not reconciled at this point, and there's going to be a lot of work to do when they get home, if that ever happens. She's replaying in her mind how Will is pretty much the one that killed her sister, and how she wishes she was the one that could have done it herself. And that ends this part of the book club. Next up, I have some friends coming over to do the actual book club part of book club, and we are going to have the most fabulous discussion about this book.
This book was an amazing mystery to solve, and I'm so excited that you decided to solve it with me. I hope you leave your thoughts in the comments section so we can continue to bond over this experience. And now that we've unmasked both the victim and the murderess, it's time to start preparing for the book club discussion. If you'd like to see a group of people discuss this book in detail and be a part of the discussion in the comments, make sure to subscribe and stop by next week. We break down the characters, the plot, and overall just put all of the characters on trial. I'll see you then.